welcome back to the Exotical Doll House. Hello, this is the doll, and I am making a video today in response to an article that I read published by Newsweek yesterday. The article was titled this: America needs a Black Lives Matter movement to rebuild the Black family. It was an opinion piece written by Delano Squires. I do agree with him that America needs a Black Lives Matter movement, make marriage great again, make sex expensive again, all of that. Because the prevalence of single parent households weakens the community and it weakens our nation. And we enjoy freedoms and policies that have led to us enjoying a quite comfortable standard of living here in the United States. And our culture is under attack, at risk, and we can do some things to preserve it and really turn the tide in the world. And one of these things that we can do is turn the focus around with regard to our romantic relationships. And this is not just a Black problem. And what I want you discuss, of course, is the MLS angle, the Black woman's experience and this article. But we'll get into why this is not just a Black problem. Obviously, Blacks are Americans. And anything that affects the quote unquote Black community affects America as a whole. And we need to stop separating the problems into just being problems that infect the Black community, because clearly the problem of fatherlessness has infected the nation. And it doesn't matter who it's happening to. And America has to stop looking at Black children and Black families as the other. And Black families have to stop looking at themselves as the other as well. And start really examining how important it is to have strong families, to preserve the way of life for themselves, the quote unquote Black community, and the American society. If you do not want to preserve American culture and American society, I would encourage you to leave America. Please leave, because there are people scrambling to get across the border to enjoy the freedoms that you enjoy. Make room for them. They need jobs. So, on to the discussion. The article basically says that standards about getting married before having children need to be restored. It doesn't say why the standard was abandoned in the first place. And I'm glad that the article didn't say why, because there are multiple reasons why. But one of the main reasons that people often point to is saying that welfare took men out of the home. And this is a statement that I do not agree with. It's not accurate. Welfare may have contributed to helping mothers feel like no matter what, there's some support out there for them from the government. And that certainly did not encourage sexual responsibility. But at no point were police officers busting in houses and dragging men out because the woman in the house was getting benefits. And up until around 1970, right around 1970, most Black Americans were married. So people were not splitting up to get welfare. 10% of the population that were single, they were probably not on welfare. Most of them were probably not even on welfare, because in the 40s and the 50s, the states would a lot of times discriminate against mothers, especially black mothers. And there were policies instituted to prevent women from having men who weren't their husbands around. There were lots of various policies until 1968, when a decision, the King versus Smith decision in the United States Supreme Court happened in 1968, and it made care and funds available for dependent children of families regardless of who lived in the house, man or woman. So in 1968, it didn't matter who was in the house.
In any given month, there are about 450,000 families drawing welfare checks in California. Every 2 weeks, the mailman delivers a check to the home of Cynthia Jones. She, her husband, and 2 children collect $423 a month. Mrs. Jones has been on welfare nearly 4 years. Her husband has not worked since last December.
And up until around 1970, 90% of black women were married. You know, they've been married at least once. I have some ideas about what actually contributed to the breakdown of the family. Of course, the black culture has been affected by it disproportionately in America, but it is not just a black problem anymore. Actually, over 40% of all births in America are to unwed mothers. Now, black women may make up a good proportion of that, but white women are gaining on us. So that's just the facts. So another thing that people might say is, oh, the crack, poverty, you know, men had to go and work, and, you know, they left their wives to go and work, and crack took a lot of men away, young men shooting and killing and death. And yeah, that's true too, but those are just some factors, and we've heard those excuses enough. We need to start examining the things that we can do something about, because we can't do anything about those things that happened in the 60s and 70s. You know, we can't do anything about that. But what we can do is something about the next 3 factors that I will name that actually contributed to the breakdown of the family and are contributing to the breakdown of families in the Western world, which we will talk about in just a bit. Because although more than 70% of children in America are born to single parents, the numbers in other countries are high as well, and that is not these numbers are not black or racially related. For example, we look at Chile in South America. In the whole population of Chile, 75%, over 75% of the children there are born out of wedlock. In Mexico, over 70%. In France, over 60%. France, okay? Over 60% of children are born out of wedlock, period. Sweden, 55%. And Sweden does not have a whole bunch of hoods in it, a whole bunch of ghettos. Portugal, Slovenia. There are other countries. These Western countries have really high out of wedlock birth rates. Meanwhile, China, the Middle Eastern countries, they have very, very low out of wedlock birth rates. China, India, Middle Eastern countries have less than 1% of their births being to single parent families. And that indicates to me that they have strong families and strong communities that are buying into the system. And these are our adversaries. They want to usurp power here so that they can be, China specifically wants to be the world power. They have laid out a plan called Assassin's Mace that was executed in the 1950s to be the 100-year plan to be completed in 2050. And they're really on pace. The only way that we can combat China at this point, because they're so efficient, is with our culture. America's culture is its best export. People want our freedoms and our way of life, and we have to do something to preserve it. So, one of the things that we can do to change the outcomes and get back to making marriage matter is to stop calling women gold diggers for wanting someone with resources. Because the fact is that romance and marrying for love was invented. Listen to Psych Hacks talk about how romance was invented.
Now, because romance was actually a historical phenomenon, it originated in the south of France in the 15th century, we know who invented it. Men invented it, more specifically, the chivalric knights of that time and place. And these men invented it for them, for men, not for women. And they invented romance in an attempt to compete with the rich and powerful men of their time for access to the best women. And this is because if a guy couldn't convince a woman that he had something special, something intangible that the king didn't have, there's no way he's getting laid. The truth about romance is that it's a strategy that lower status men have adopted in their attempt to compete successfully with higher status men for women.
The truth is that poorer men needed to stand out and come up with a way to induce women to partner with them. And because most women will choose the rich guy with money. And that's smart, because women, especially in days before the Industrial Revolution, women needed to depend on men to provide resources for them while they were very fragile and pregnant and raising children and making a family, organizing the home. And the men benefited from the woman organizing in the home so that he could go out and work. And still, very often, the woman's work around the house and the farm and even outside of the house guaranteed the survival of the family. But the man's real job was to bring in the bulk of the resources and create a direction so that the family could either earn or grow enough money for food and shelter to survive. So women should be looking for men with resources. So women who want and are attracted to men because they have resources should be viewed as the norm. As a matter of fact, women should only engage with men who are making offerings. And I say often that sluts, women who just want to sleep with men for pleasure, could be considered sluts. And I'm not slut shaming. What I am saying is that it would be wise for them to get money in exchange, or get some resources in exchange for their sexual energy, so that way that the value of sex becomes expensive again. That is something that women can do, is be resource-minded, not gold diggers, but resource-minded, especially with regard to sexuality. Mismanaging sexuality has led to broken homes. And if women can look forward to a man providing and being invested in the future of the family, it will help them to be motivated to get married and have partners. If they knew that they could depend on men without the abuse from the past, or without the hungry desire for the submission that is not even outlined in the Bible. What's in the Bible is really a departure from what a lot of men feel is submission. Because men are supposed to submit to their wives too. That's also in there, but that gets overlooked. So, submitting to God or submitting to a higher ideal, men are not doing that. So why should women submit to what? Submit to what? Submit to service, to serve the service of God. That would be something to submit to. And most of the time, men are not moving in that, they're not moving in that frequency these days. And women aren't either. So, anywho, women should be looking for men who have the resources to give them that comfort and willingness. It gives them a willingness to create pleasure around the man. Because ultimately, after the children, especially for people who might decide to partner up for middle age, marriage is there to make life bearable in the latter years as well. It's not just for making kids. It's not just for romance. Romance is the least of it. It's for much more practical reasons. Listen to Jordan Peterson describe why marriage is important.
I mean, the reason that you have a relationship with someone over the long term, it's complicated, but part of it is in sickness and in health. Part of it is that life is punctuated by tragic circumstances of monstrous magnitude, and you're just more robust and resilient if there are two of you manning the oars rather than one. Mm-hmm. So that's a huge part of it. And of course, because our culture is also so youth obsessed, we never think about the last half of our life. A huge part of the utility in having a partner is companionship, and also the maintenance of sanity. I mean, you need someone around so that every time you manifest one of your uncontrollable weaknesses, they slap you on the side of the head and tell you to behave. And you do that for each other in a relationship that where communication is actually where communication actually occurs. And because of that, the two of you are much less likely to walk into a pit.
When we think about marriage, it has a greater purpose than for pure pleasure. There is benefit for years beyond child rearing. So if we as a people could also rediscover the sanctity of partnership and the sanctity of having families to lean on when things start to go wrong, because health goes wrong. Fortunes can be lost, regained. We need social outlets to stay alive. And marriage facilitates that. So refocusing on marriage would be number 2. So number 1 is to stop calling women gold diggers for wanting a man to have resources. And number 2 is to restore the sanctity of marriage. That's something else we can do. Restore the sanctity of relationships in general. And for men specifically, and women, the third thing that we can do is hold our loved ones accountable when they are wasting their sexual energy, their sexual life force. Because it's very interesting that we call out people for addictions to alcohol and addictions to cocaine, but nobody's doing an intervention to stop their loved ones from making life decisions that will impact them forever with their sexuality. And people might step in and tell women, no, you're valuable. They tell girls that, but people should be spreading the news to boys. Listen, Do not waste your life force and your seed sowing it in grounds that you don't want to till, in creating crops that you don't want to feed. You know, Frances Cress Welsing was saying that, you know, it's an insult to call someone a bird brain. It's an insult to call someone a bird brain. But she said that even a bird knows to create a nest before it starts laying eggs. So what does it make you when, you know, even lower than a bird brain? You're not creating a nest before laying eggs. This is a fundamental rule that has to be reinstated for both men and women. Women can't be held to some high moral standard while men get to behave as degenerates. And that's one of the reasons why the feminist movement was so popular, because women of the 1920s and 1910s, some of them were just low-key lesbians who wanted to live free and didn't want to be bothered with men and have to be bothered marrying one so they could have property. But some of them were women who were tired of getting beaten by their husbands, tired of getting cheated on, tired of him spending all of their money on everything else except the family, tired of him partying all night in the office with the party girls of the day. So, you know, holding men, holding women, holding young people, old people too, the old birds out here just making babies and being irresponsible sexually. We had to start really upholding a sexual responsibility. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to go back to the purity culture of old, but managing your sexual self has to be important as managing your finances. There should be commercials about managing your sexual self, managing sexual health, just as important as managing money. You see a Merrill Lynch commercial, you need to see a keep it in your pants commercial. So saying no to easy, cheap sex in favor of virtue, that would be a cultural shift that both sides need to get back on. And, you know, regardless of party affiliation, I think that would be an important message to be spread for individuals of all sexual orientations. And there are other reasons why overt sexuality is harmful to those of any race, creed, and I won't say overt, but I will say irresponsible sexuality. You know, party responsibly. That's all I'm saying. So abandoning wonton culture, those are really just a couple of the things. Stop calling women gold diggers for requiring a man to have resources, and also holding people of both sexes accountable for their, you know, bad sexual decisions, because we have to move in a new direction where we establish a code of conduct for living that we can all agree on, and enforce that through culture, and do that so that we can have a better world. It's almost like crunch time for the most part. So, you know, this is, again, the age of Aquarius, time for unity among women. So women, what we can take from this is encourage sexual responsibility with women, and the women who they want to explore their sexuality, at least get something for it. At least get paid for it in some way. Just giving it away for cheap may happen because you want attention and you're missing that masculine energy. Go find masculine energy and support in other ways besides sexual attention. Because it's good to go let a man help you open the door for you, or open your car door, go to the valet, go have another experience with a man serving you in a different way and honoring you outside of sexuality, and see if that doesn't cure some of that strong urge that you might have for sex. And if you do have a strong desire for sex, at least require some form of payment for it. But, just offering up yourself in exchange for a skin-on-skin experience with a man because he's cute is an irresponsible sexual decision. Even if you're 45 and you just want to hump the pool boy, do you, but at least plan it out and make sure that you are protecting yourself from STDs and protecting yourself from the risk of him infecting you mentally and getting into your life where he really doesn't belong because he digmatized you. That it could be an irresponsible sexual decision. It just is likely. Women especially do not go seeking out your approval in the eyes of men through their sexual gaze. Experience them and their support in other ways. Admire how they make your life more efficient and are helpful to you. So that's something else that women can do. Another thing that really influenced the prevalence of single parenthood, beyond shaming women for wanting resources, and the prevalence of choosing a partner based on love and romance instead of, choosing to lay down with someone based on their planning ability of planning to support you. There's the culture of love and that romantic culture perpetuated in Hollywood. Nobody really talks about how important music, movies, and things like that are. They get into our psyche. So the love culture perpetuated in Hollywood is that the girl has a choice between two men. And, the rich guy, he's usually cold or inefficient in some way. And she likes him well enough. But the poor guy, he's taller, he's more debonair, he's handsome, he's a swashbuckler. And of course, the poor guy wins because she ends up loving him. That's that romance culture that's perpetuated in Hollywood that Psych Hacks referred to earlier.
So what was the story before romance was invented? Like, how did it work in medieval and ancient times? Leaving aside the fact that women rarely got to choose their own partners, how were men selected for women back then? Well, before romance, it was just the rich, powerful guy against the poor, down-his-luck dude. Which, like my hypothetical counterexample, also isn't a fair fight. The first guy wins every single time. And in those times, not only did the rich and powerful men get their pick of the choicest women, it wasn't all that uncommon for these men to have a whole harem of women. I mean, according to the Bible, King Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. That guy had 1,000 women, which means that at that time in that place, there was probably 999 other guys who were pissed at Solomon for bogarting all the best ladies for himself. But can you really blame the women? Why wouldn't they choose Solomon? He was the king. He had the money and the palaces, which means he could offer resources and protection. And he was wise and generous to boot. The other guys couldn't compete.
So the other factors, the Hollywood culture perpetuating love culture, romance culture, instead of planning for families. They're perpetuating the sex-based love rather than community-based love, which is, society, and like logic-based love. They're promoting love and marriage based on a feeling. And not even marriage, mostly just falling in love after some adventure and sleeping together. So that impacted black people and white people alike. But, black people are aspirational. So we're looking up at Hollywood like, oh, well, this is what they're doing it. We need to do it. Sexual revolution the 60s, everybody with the free love, women saying, okay, well, men, you're degenerate. We're going to be just as degenerate as you.
I ain't thinking about holding up for no sex, my man. If a girl, she get having a baby, carrying a baby, hey, that's on her. I'm not going to stop my pleasures because of another woman.
What about birth control? What about condoms?
Girls don't like them things. They don't like them things. They'll tell you to take them things off. They figure that you saying that they filthy or they dirty or something.
It's been a startling change in values. 25 years ago, you would not have heard such things said so freely because they were not embraced so widely. The strong family was still the backbone of Black America, and 3 out of 4 children had both parents at home. That is true no longer. Most Black children are now growing up without their fathers. The result is a world turned upside down as children copy what they see and repeat what they learn.
And Black women, especially after the 60s, the Civil Rights Act, everything that came into play, allowing them to work and make money and not have to rely on men, especially some men who were mostly just there as a pair of pants, not an actual provider. Something happened where men lost motivation to provide, and it's mostly because they did not feel a connection to the children that they created. Why? Because they created them in relationships without a foundation.
Lamont is 31 years old, and much of what has happened over the last generation to the young Black man who grew up in a broken family in the inner city is reflected in his experience. Lamont was raised in Newark by a single mother and grew up on the street. Now he has 2 children of his own who live with their mother in another part of town. He works when he can cleaning oil drums, but does not support his children or Brenda's.
We need some new code that is promoted in American society for our interpersonal relationships in our community and in our homes. And manners, polite society, basically. We could just go back to church, but, things that took men out of the home, whatever it was that took men out of the home, also took them out of the church. So, until we figure out what that is, then we will still have these same patterns because women are still there. Women are still in church. Women are still in the home in most instances. So let's make women wives again, Black or white, whatever country you might be in the Western world where we enjoy all of these freedoms that I would love to preserve. And, if you have other thoughts about what may have contributed to the disintegration of marriage in the Black community and in America overall, of course, we can talk about, no-fault divorce. That happened in the 80s. Ronald Reagan, I believe, that was under his watch. Creating divorce, no-fault divorce, and making it easy for people to exit the unions that laid the foundation for our communities. So should we make entering into marriage easy and leaving it hard? Maybe. That may be another solution. So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Again, this is the doll, and I'm here to offer perspectives and ideas that are designed to help heal the racial divide in America. The racial divide, it can't last. And the colorist debate really needs to end. So, thanks again, and please subscribe. Like the video, that is free.